What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Nissan Rogue. Huge thanks to Nissan for providing me with the 2020 Rogue here to review for you guys today. So about the Rogue, what continues on here for the 2020 model year, it's, this generation has been around for several years now. It's one of the oldest competitors in this segment, but they have done some nice things to keep it fresh over the years. I especially love this Monarch Orange color. I think it's really great that they're offering an exciting color here because a lot of family crossovers come in fairly dull colors, so I like that this can be a little bit fun. Of course, they have all the usual bland colors if you're into that as well, but they did do a few other things here. You have the new V-Motion grille up front there, which I think was something from last year that, is a nice new addition. You also do have a new headlamp design, but unfortunately we still have halogen headlamps as standard. And this is an SV trim, so this isn't even a base model. It's a mid-grade trim and you still have halogen headlamps. You have to go up to some of the top trims in order to get LED headlamps, which is kind of a shame considering most of the competitors these days offer standard LEDs across the board. So that is one area where, the Rogue falls a little short here and starts to show its age, but otherwise it looks good. You have 18-inch wheels that look good. The sides and the back really haven't changed much over the past, 5 or 6 years here, but still looks good. It doesn't really jump out at you, but nicely blends in. And for some people, that's just what they want. And so overall, it's just a nice looking crossover. As for the interior of the Nissan Rogue, well, there's a few areas where it's starting to show its age, but it's still a fairly pleasant place to be for most people. They won't have too many complaints. First off, sitting down in these seats, we have the zero gravity Nissan seats. It's one of their signature things, and they are very comfortable seats. And for a family crossover, I have no complaints. The bolstering and stuff is all adequate, and again, just nice, comfortable seats. But again, mid-grade trim, and we still have cloth. Some of the competitors around this price point, you do get leatherette or leather seats. These seats are also heated, but they're also only two-stage heated seats, so you only have high or low with this old-fashioned plastic switch. A lot of competitors these days have three-stage heated seats, so just a little thing to note there. But one thing that is pretty new here is the steering wheel. So this was something that was updated a couple of years ago, and it's great. Now this is the leather-wrapped heated steering wheel you get here in this SV with a premium package, and I love the flat bottom of it. A really great steering wheel. Honestly, probably my favorite part of the interior. It's a really nice feel. Just a few buttons here on it, and that's it. And so, yeah, really, I think an attractive and a good feeling wheel. The gauges are also something I can't really complain about. They're just simple, but very clear, easy to read and precise. I do like that little color display in the middle there. And it will scroll through your basic information and also your ProPilot Assist now, since that's one of the options this one has. It is an option, and so that'll do full speed cruise control all the way down to a stop, and also the steering assist. And so that's kind of what the ProPilot Assist is, doing. So that's how you can configure, your following distance, how much steering assist you want, all that kind of stuff. And then coming over to the center here, you have this 7-inch color display, and I will say it is touchscreen, so that's nice. You have a volume and tune knob, which is also nice because that's not always a given with a lot of other manufacturers. So I do appreciate that. That makes it nice and simple. But it's only 7 inches. Some of the newer competitors are 8 inches, and it's also a little low resolution. It's okay for navigating through, radio stations and doing all that kind of stuff. This one has navigation as an option too. That's all fine. It does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well, so that's also another box to check. It's great that it has that. So those things are good, but for example, the backup camera, and this one actually has the 360 camera, which is something that most of the competitors don't even offer. So that is a nice feature. It does work, but as you can see, it's also very low resolution and just makes this whole vehicle feel a little more dated, just because they didn't bother upgrading the camera, in the backup camera there for several years now. So that's something that must be a carryover from, 5 or 6 years ago. But otherwise, still a nice infotainment system. I will say though, the volume and tune knobs, I wish they would come out just a little bit more because they're very shallow. And so, even me as a guy with short nails, I am scratching up against this trim around the radio, just moving this volume knob, and I can't get a really good grip on the volume knob. I would think that, if anyone else has longer nails, they're going to, not enjoy that as much because you're going to really have to just use your fingertips to use that volume knob. So I wish that was something that was a little bit larger. But the knobs coming down here for climate control are nice and large, and just a, basic auto climate control display there. And then otherwise here you have just a little cubby underneath that with an auxiliary jack, a USB jack, a power outlet, and also your parking brake controls there. And a little cubby that's nicely rubberized, but not large enough for a smartphone or anything in there. And this is where, things start to get a little odd as far as the way the setup is. So you have the shifter and everything is all very high, which is fine, but there's just so much wasted space here, where some of the newer competitors are using and having massive bins here, and this, you don't have quite as much storage as a lot of the newer competitors. But behind the shifter here, you do have 2 cup holders, another little slot here for the key or something, something small there. And then you have the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded and actually feels great. One of the few parts of this interior that feel, kind of luxurious. And you open that up, and then you have a very nice deep cubby there that also has a USB jack and another power outlet in there as well. And so a good amount of space in there, no complaints whatsoever. You also have map pockets in the doors with a bottle holder. That's also great. So those things are nice, but there's just, all the plastic around here is rock hard around your knees and stuff. And that is an area where a lot of some of the newer competitors have now had some padding and stuff there to make that a little bit nicer. So that's something I'm not in love with. Even over here on the passenger side, that looks like, oh, that's nice stitched, like pleather or something. No, that's also rock hard. So that's kind of a bummer. There's a lot of cheap plastic in this vehicle, and this one, as tested, is $31,500. And at that price point, I would expect something to feel a little nicer. Even like the door handles are just cheap plastic. I mean, stuff like that, when you're over 30 grand, you gotta have that kind of stuff feel better, and most of the competitors do. And then also just the ergonomics here are kind of weird. So for example, the heated seat, or the heated steering wheel controls, and like your sport mode, and all these things that you would actually be using, on a daily basis, like the heated steering wheel especially, you gotta reach all the way down over here to do that. And so most other companies either have it right on the steering wheel or in a much easier to reach place. It's actually hard to do while driving, to reach down and try and find which button you're hitting, because if you don't hit the right one, then you're hitting your all-wheel drive lock button or the sport mode or whatever. And so I just don't like that. I think they just kind of added these features little by little as the years went on, and just were like, hey, we got a free space here, let's put a bunch of buttons here. Not a great placement for that, in my opinion. But that's it. As far as doing all the basics every day, everything's fine. All the elbow points and stuff feel nice. Steering wheel's good. All the basics they've still done very well. Backseat space in the Rogue is also a very good back seat. I will say it is a very high sitting position. It's like stadium seating. I feel like you're actually looking down at the front of the vehicle whenever you're sitting in the back there. But regardless, you still have really good headroom, surprisingly, just because of just the very tall shape of this vehicle. You also have good legroom. With me being 5'9" and sitting behind myself, I easily have about 4 inches of legroom to spare there. So no complaints as far as space goes. There's pockets in the doors with a bottle holder as well. When you look forward, you'll see 2 air vents there, but that's it. There isn't any kind of power outlets back there like some of the newer competitors have. And also there isn't any actual real cup holders aside from the bottle holders. So the only way you get cup holders is to fold down that center armrest. But as you will see, it's kind of odd. Most other vehicles have just, a little part that separates. But this one, you actually, if you want those 2 cup holders, then you have a gap in between the 2 back seats there, which is kind of strange. I've never seen that before. Just seems like a corner that was cut or something. I don't know why they couldn't have just separated that little center part into 2, different sections so that you could actually have both. But yeah, a little interesting thing there. And again, I think all the newer competitors do things a little bit in a better fashion, but it works, I guess. Just kind of a strange thing. Trunk space in the Rogue is okay. I would say for a vehicle of this size, though, it's a little underwhelming. A lot of even smaller crossovers seem to have about that much space these days. So that is another thing where this is just starting to show its age, and the newer competitors just have more space. So it's really a length thing. I wish there was a little bit more length to it. Otherwise, the width is good, and the depth is okay. Now, it looks a little more shallow, and that's mostly just because you have those 2 separate areas so that you can pull that tray thing, and you'll see extra space underneath that floor there. But you can also prop it up, which is kind of cool. So you can have a built-in divider there if you don't want stuff sliding all over the place. And I think that's actually a pretty smart feature, and something I haven't really seen in any of the competitors. And so that's nice to have there. And but yeah, and then that further back portion there, you can lift that up, and there's more storage there. And then you can also slide all those a little bit lower. So if you want to have just a nice tall space, you can get rid of those little dividers as well. So it's a decent amount of space, but I think, you know, most of the newer stuff these days seems to have a little bit more space back there. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Rogue here has Nissan's basic key still. They've used for years, but I actually still like it. It's nice and small, and a lot of keys these days are getting huge, and I don't like that. So I like that this is nice and small. You still do have actual like metal feeling buttons here on it, so nothing to complain about there. It's an old key, but I think it's still a really nice key. So of course it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the SV trim. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Alright, so setting off here in the 2020 Nissan Rogue. So, first thing you might have heard right off the bat is this CVT. This engine has a CVT transmission attached to it, and so it's a little buzzy, especially whenever you're accelerating. It has a rubber band type of effect where it makes a bunch of racket going up hills and stuff, and then the CVT starts adjusting, and then it kind of slingshots you forward and gives you, you know, some decent acceleration, which I'll show here in a minute. But, you know, it's a nice cruising thing whenever you're just, you know, going along at a relaxed pace. You have very good visibility, you know, with A-pillars that are a little thicker than some of the competitors, but you have a nice high seating position, so very easy to see out. View out of the back is fantastic, and so very easy to drive. It's a smooth, comfortable ride, you know, especially at lower speeds, but even whenever you're at higher speeds. And, you know, everything it does in a very predictable manner. You know, the brakes feel very predictable. Throttle is responsive, even though you have that CVT kind of switching things up on you. It is all very responsive feeling, but we'll go ahead and put it into the sport mode here. And let's turn down onto this back road and see how the acceleration is. Here we go. See, it's like a not natural acceleration. But it gets up and goes, I mean, decently well. I mean, so we're running a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine. It has 170 horsepower and 175 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 in about 9 seconds, which is leisurely, but isn't as slow as some of the competitors out there. And so, you know, it's adequate. I've already been driving this vehicle around for 83 miles now, and it's fine. Everything about this vehicle, I keep coming back to the word fine. There's nothing really wrong with anything about the Rogue. It's just not very exciting either. But for some people, you know, I can see how Nissan sells so many of these, because you go in, you go for a test drive, and it all feels fine. And, you know, for a lot of people, that is good. And, you know, if you're not cross-shopping and you're not trying to get the absolute most for your dollar, if you're not obsessed with driving dynamics, you're not a car enthusiast like I am, then you'll hop in this and be like, it drives nice, it's smooth, it's quiet, it's refined, good enough, you know? And so I kind of have that same feeling, like, you know, the Rogue isn't something that I get excited about when I go, you know, and hop in it to go for a drive, but I don't loathe it either. It's a nice thing to run errands in. You know, I've been just, you know, going back and forth to the airport in it and doing all that kind of stuff, and no complaints whatsoever. It does all that very well. I will say, you know, it is a little bit annoying hearing the buzziness going up hills and stuff sometimes with the CVT, but I mean, the CVT is getting more and more common among many of the manufacturers that it competes against as well. Toyota uses one, Subaru uses one, you know, several others do. So really, if you want a normal automatic, one of your only options is going to be Mazda. They're still sticking with a normal automatic. And so, yeah, it's, you know, it's fine. I think for most people going back and forth to work, a CVT is going to be, you know, totally okay, not a big deal, and you do get used to it, and it's only whenever you're flooring it where it gets kind of weird. Otherwise, it kind of putts around just the same way a normal automatic does. But we're going around some corners here to see about the handling, and actually the handling is one of the things I am most impressed about with the Rogue. It handles very flatly, considering we only have, you know, just normal 225 wide crossover tires here, 60 series sidewall, you know, not a sporty setup by any means with these 18-inch wheels, but it handles itself really flat. And, you know, if you're in a little bit of a hurry and you're going around some tighter corners and stuff, this isn't going to feel like it's falling all over itself. And, you know, like some of the Nissan stuff in the past hasn't felt great in the corners. The Pathfinder and even like the Rogue Sport just didn't feel good in corners. So I was actually going into this with fairly low expectations. But I think this is the best handling Nissan SUV that I've experienced so far. And it's very flat. So even from an enthusiast standpoint, you know, tossing it into this corner here, I don't have any complaints. It actually handles itself very well. So that's another thing. If you're just, non-enthusiast, just hopping in, going for a test drive, you'll be like, wow, this thing handles really well. And compared to the competition, I would say that it's right mid-pack. It doesn't handle as well as, for example, I think the Mazda CX-5 is still my favorite in this segment of, family crossovers as far as handling goes, and as far as power. Those have a little bit more power and feel a little bit sportier. Having the normal automatic's nice, although you do lose out on a few MPG with the Mazda because of that normal automatic that's a little dated. But I think the Rogue handles itself very well, and it's kind of confidence inspiring because you have the all-wheel drive system, which is nice whenever you're in inclement weather, and then you have good handling on the road, even whether it's wet or dry, whatever. It does a very good job. And you also have pretty good steering for a family crossover as well. It's not the most precise steering, but it does give you a little bit of feel, and it's an appropriate weight, so it's not trying to be heavy to be sportier or too light either. It's kind of a Goldilocks of good amount of weight to me, and feels good. And so, every time I've hopped in the Rogue here to go for a drive, it's totally pleasant, totally fine. I'm never really upset about it. There was one time in my week of driving here where we had a frosty morning and I was heading out, and the frost must have been covering the radar sensor, because it was just flashing constantly saying that it didn't have the automatic braking, emergency braking system. It wasn't working, and once it thawed out, then it was fine. So that's just something you'll have to keep in mind if you park your car outside and it gets frosty and stuff. That automatic emergency braking might not always work. Another thing that I didn't really get to try a whole lot, but I did get to sample a little bit, was the Pro Pilot Assist system, which is your average adaptive cruise system. I didn't get to try it in any kind of heavy traffic to see the stop and go feature, but it will go all the way down to the stop, and that's a nice thing. And then having the steering assist is nice as well. It works about as well as like Honda's system, which also does a steering assist, and it's good. Obviously it's not like it's self-driving or anything like that, but it does take some fatigue out of long highway trips to leave that on. And this one, I didn't drive a long distance in it, but it still was pretty good with the way it corrected and stuff, and didn't ping pong or anything like that. And I will say that all the driver assist stuff in this vehicle is fairly in the background. It's fairly unobtrusive. So even like the lane keeping assist system, sometimes if you get close to the line or you're just on the line there barely, it will sometimes give you a beep, but the beep just comes from like the rear speakers, and it's not as loud or in your face as some of the other companies do it. And some people may think, well, that means it's less safe because it doesn't get your attention as well, but it got my attention. Still, it was just in a more subtle way where it wasn't quite as scary. And I think whenever you're giving people these alerts and stuff, you don't want to scare them. You want to get their attention, but I think if you scare people, that can make it even worse. And so I think Nissan has the better approach here with kind of being a little more subtle with those alerts and stuff. And so I appreciated that. One thing I did not appreciate though is that for some reason, I don't know, it's in the navigation system, I think, where it has the Sirius XM traffic updates. And so it's nice to have all that kind of stuff, but it will strangely announce things like, for example, there's a local road by me that's closed, and it kept telling me every single time I drove past that road in a very loud volume, road closed ahead. And it's like, okay, thanks, but it scared the crap out of me the first time it did it. And second, I'm just like, I wish there was a way to turn that off, or even if you've given me that alert, like, you don't need to give me that alert every single day as I drive past it. So, that's something that was a little annoying, and I tried going into the settings and I couldn't find any way, at least right on the surface, to disable that. So, that's something that's, not ideal. The only other thing though is night driving, of course, with these halogen headlamps is pretty terrible. Obviously we're spoiled these days with having, at least me personally, I'm always driving vehicles with LED headlamps. So when I have to go down to halogens again, it's like, man, like, this is so much worse for visibility at night. And obviously they do offer LEDs, but you got to go up to the higher trims. All of the competitors, I think, these days now have standard LEDs, and the fact that the Nissan doesn't is just seems like a weird exclusion at this point. I get that, again, the Rogue is due for an all-new version relatively soon, but you would think in the meantime they would want to have that feature to be competitive, so you don't have to be spending, you know, nearly 40 grand on a Rogue in order to get decent headlamps, but currently that's the case. Another thing I do really like about the Rogue is the fact that it continues to use a naturally aspirated engine. I just like that, you know, a lot of the competitors are going to turbos, but some of them aren't as well. Like, you know, Mazda's still sticking with a naturally aspirated engine, so is Toyota, and you know, I think that from a reliability standpoint, that seems to be a little bit simpler. You know, you have less moving parts, it's a, you know, lower compression ratio, you have less stress on the engine than you do with a turbo engine, and so I think from a reliability standpoint, having the naturally aspirated engine is great, and especially this one being 2.5 liters means it's probably not the most efficient to have a larger engine like that and still have, you know, only 170 horsepower, but it means it's less stressed. And so if you're okay not having the best fuel economy in your class, then, you know, I think having this engine is actually going to be good from a longevity standpoint. Although I will say that this CVT does work this engine hard, and I mean, I'm still in sport mode here. I can reach down here and turn that off, but even in the normal mode, you know, going up hills like on the highway and stuff, it'll still just sit at like 3,000 RPMs, and I'm like, there is no way that this is good for fuel economy or for the engine to be doing that. And so that is one thing. So in my now 88 miles of driving here, my fuel economy has been 23.7 mpg, which is a little disappointing considering my driving was about 50% highway. I would say at least 40 of those miles were on the highway, and this vehicle's rated at 25 in the city, so the bare minimum I was hoping to get 25, and then it's supposed to get 27 combined, and then 32 on the highway. Didn't see anything like that. You know, I was again hoping to get close to that 27, so it did fall quite a bit short of my expectations as far as fuel economy goes. It isn't an overly heavy vehicle either. You know, he's only weigh about 3,600 pounds, so you know, wasn't expecting to only be doing, you know, barely, not even 24 mpg. But getting off the twisty back road and just into some normal commuting traffic here, like most people are going to be doing in the Rogue, this is where it really shines. You know, you have the CVT just doing its thing in the background, but it's, you know, not really buzzy. You just have such a smooth, comfortable ride here in the Rogue. It is really good. It really soaks up bumps so well, and again gives you that nice flat ride though, so it really you know, doesn't get upset by bumps or anything like that. It really has a composed feeling to it, and it drives great whenever you're just cruising around, you know, again behind traffic and stuff. And so they really nailed, you know, what most people are going to be using this for. Again, if you hop in one of these, go for a test drive, you do your normal daily routine in this vehicle, it's probably going to, you know, meet every one of your expectations and, you know, just be very good. The Mazda, I think, is still my favorite in this segment. The RAV4, I think, is also one that is brand new now and has some really nice upgrades over this. And that's really the last thing to mention here is the pricing here of the Rogue, because now I'm just going to be comparing them MSRP versus MSRP. Obviously, this one being probably the oldest among all of its competitors, you're probably going to get more discounts off of these at the dealer than you would from some of the competitors, which are a little newer and fresher. But comparing them MSRP to MSRP, this one again is exactly $31,500. These SVs start in the $27,000 range before destination, which is about $1,000. And then this one has the premium package, which is $1,800. That gives you the leather-wrapped heated steering wheel, the Sirius XM, the navigation, and a couple other things, the ProPilot Assist, and then also you have to pay a little bit extra for all-wheel drive as well, because that's only an option here on the Nissans. And so all those things add up from that, you know, originally 27, 28 to closer to, you know, the 31,500 that this one is. And comparing them, you know, apples to apples, the RAV4, you can get basically everything in a newer package with a nicer interior, and again, a newer vehicle with that generation just came out last year, and that's about $1,000 less MSRP versus MSRP. So you know, obviously it's going to come down to the kind of deals you can get on a Rogue as to whether or not it's going to make sense from a value standpoint. But as far as you know, it goes at the actual manufacturer pricing standpoint, you know, the Rogue just doesn't have the value that you would want in order to convince you that okay, the hard plastics and stuff are okay. Whenever the Toyota and even the Mazda is another one that for actually you can get a Mazda CX-5 Touring for about $2,500 less than this, and you don't get a heated steering wheel on those. You don't get the surround view camera either, so it's not all the features you get. But if you're okay giving up those two features from the Nissan, then I mean you have like padded knee areas in the Mazda. The Mazda actually feels like an entry-level luxury vehicle. But I also think the Mazda looks much better. It's, I mean, a gorgeous looking vehicle, and shows that, family crossovers don't have to be fitting in. They can stand out and be very attractive looking. I think the Mazda wins hands down as far as styling goes. Like I said, there's all kinds of other options as well. You have Subaru Forester, which is actually cheaper, Mazda or Honda CR-V, which is also cheaper, and a lot of these actually do better fuel economy as well. Now, the Mazda, you do lose out on 1 or 2 mpg depending on which metric you're looking at compared to the Nissan, but all the others I think actually have better fuel economy, some by several mpg over this. So that is one area too. So you're going to be getting better fuel economy and getting a vehicle that's newer for less money than this, again comparing them by their sticker prices. And you have more storage space in most of those, since again they're newer and they've reworked the interior and stuff, and so all those things, whenever you start cross-shopping is when the Rogue starts to, again, show its age. If you just are looking at the Rogue in a vacuum and you're just focused on it, then, it's okay. But compared to the competitors these days, and I'll link my reviews to the other competitors. I haven't driven all of them, but I did do the new RAV4 and the CX-5, for example. If you're curious to see, I mean, those, I think, offer a little bit more for the money. And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with the Rogue, but $31,500 isn't chump change these days, and for and a lot of the other manufacturers recognize that. That's why like Mazda gives you leatherette at that price point that's still $2,500 cheaper than this Nissan with cloth seats. So there's just they just didn't keep up with the value component, I think, at Nissan, and I'm hoping that a new Rogue will fix some of those things and nicely modernize everything. But as it sits right now, I don't think the Rogue is close to the top of the pack. I think there's a lot of really good competitors. This is a very hot segment. But if you have some affinity for Nissan, or you just really like the way the Rogue looks or something, I think that the Rogue is still a good choice. It's just not the best choice these days. So yeah, that's about all my thoughts here on the Rogue, but let me know your thoughts on the Nissan Rogue in the comments below. Huge thanks to Nissan for providing me with the Rogue here to review for you guys today. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.